June 28, 1969. At 1:20 a.m., police officers stormed a small gay bar in Greenwich Village, New York City. It was Saturday night. The bar was packed with patrons enjoying a night out in this safe haven away from the prying eyes of society. The police burst in, looking to arrest transgender and homosexual people. According to New York law at the time, if a person wasn't wearing at least 3 articles of clothing that matched their assigned gender, they would be arrested. The patrons resisted the police's efforts, but this only caused them to use more force. As they were marched out into the street to be corralled into police cars, a crowd began to gather, yelling at the police to stop. The crowd grew. Years of injustice and prejudice culminated on this night. The people had had enough. It was their time to fight back. A brick was thrown and the riots began.
Something snapped. It's like, this is not right. What are we being beat up for? You know, for wanting to dance?
The crowd threw change at the police and rocked the cars, which escalated to throwing stones and beer bottles through the windows of the inn and at the police officers. The police locked themselves in the inn, and the crowd proceeded to light the inn on fire. However, reinforcements arrived before any police were injured. Yet they were no match for the raging crowd that had formed by this point. The mob eventually expanded into thousands, and for 6 more nights, they rioted. Stonewall in itself was a tragic event, as the police raid was yet another reminder of the horrible injustices against LGBT people. Yet it was a triumphant signal to the national LGBT community that changed the focus of gay activist groups and actively initiated the gay liberation movement. The tragedy of the Stonewall riots was a result of the culmination of decades upon decades of discrimination towards LGBT people on social, economic, and political fronts. Life for a gay man would be ruined if he was caught. Police would often raid bars and clubs and arrest large groups of people, publicly shaming and outing them to their families. This heightened stigma against the LGBT community led many individuals to fear coming out, and many stayed behind masks that hid their true sexual preferences for fear of retribution.
There are a lot of kids here, and if we catch you with a homosexual, the rest of your life will be a living hell. And you will be caught.
The increases in social and political injustices were the main focus of several emerging gay activist groups.
What Stonewall does is that it creates what becomes a militant, grassroots, mass movement, which hadn't existed before. There had been activism for almost a generation, but you could hardly claim that there was, in any way, mass activism.
Before Stonewall, gay activism groups were few and far apart. In the early 20th century, the few gay activist groups that existed worked in hiding out of fear of persecution. They referred to themselves as homophile groups rather than gay activist groups to indicate their belief that homosexuals should integrate into mainstream society, which would facilitate their main agenda to fix discrimination in the workforce. They were mostly focused on closing the pay gap, reducing unemployment among LGBT people, and ending workplace discrimination against homosexuals. One of the largest groups was the Mattachine Society, which was an organization that worked hard to try and convince homosexual males to conform to heterosexual society's norms. Another large group was the Daughters of Bilitis, who formed in order to create public areas to allow lesbians to meet and interact away from the judgment of the police and family members. The Daughters of Bilitis, similar to the Mattachine Society, encouraged conformity with mainstream heterosexual culture. The group worked closely with the Mattachine Society as well, creating the beginnings of a cohesive gay community. However, the advent of the women's rights movement in the 1960s brought conflicting interests into the group, leading to internal conflict and the eventual disbanding of the group. The lack of organized action from dispersed activism groups left people hopeless, forcing them to endure relentless discrimination every day. Amidst the ruins and wreckage of Stonewall, a new wave of activism arose. People gained strength from the show of community of the Stonewall riots. Brave veterans of Stonewall banded together to take matters into their own hands and fight for their rights.
The very name of it takes on significant new connotations and meanings, and it spread, and awareness of it starts to spread fairly quickly through networks of activists, networks of activists in which there are, some of those activists are gay people, and now they're becoming gay liberationists because of Stonewall and what Stonewall means to them.
The new groups resulting directly from Stonewall shifted their focus from keeping LGBT people contained in a secure, sheltered community and working to end legislative discrimination to fighting for the right to be able to express themselves like everyone else in society. These groups, fueled by a new, more passionate motive, made significantly more progress and officially established the beginning of the gay liberation movement. The Gay Liberation Front and Gay Activist Alliance were two of the most prolific of these groups. The Gay Liberation Front was originally made up of members from the Mattachine Action Committee who became frustrated by the lack of action. Members including Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson split off, forming the Gay Liberation Front in 1969 immediately after Stonewall. The group embraced the word gay in their name, a drastic change compared to the discrete names of previous groups. But they didn't just focus on LGBT rights and took on a radical liberal stance for the time, protesting for women's rights, African American rights, and against the Vietnam War. Consequently, not much was accomplished in terms of legislative change due to its wide variety of interests, creating conflict within the group. The Gay Activist Alliance was created out of dissatisfaction with the proceedings of the Gay Liberation Front. They wanted to create a new, politically neutral group that would focus solely on secure, basic human rights, dignity, and freedom for all gay people. The group was highly organized, ensuring they would avoid the inefficiency that the GLF faced from an unspecific agenda. They divided into subcommittees, creating a multifaceted approach to advancing gay rights politically, economically, and socially. In this way, they were able to maintain structure, allowing them to start creating a unified community by reaching out to gay activist groups across the nation, strengthening the platform of the movement. The GAA was most well known for their ZAPs, a guerrilla-style public demonstration intended to embarrass homophobic public figures and draw attention to the gay liberation movement, garnering large amounts of support from the general public, such as when in 1970, protesters handcuffed themselves together outside the New York mayor's office to protest job discrimination against gay people, leading to Mayor John Lindsay signing an order ending job discrimination against LGBT people the very next year. Through the networking and the increase in awareness these two activist groups propagated, they successfully set the legacy of Stonewall in motion with Christopher Street Liberation Day on June 28, 1970, later known as the first Pride in history. Pride was created as a reminder to the world of the struggles of the LGBT community and a protest for the advancement of LGBT rights. The tragedies that LGBT people faced before Stonewall, on the nights of Stonewall, and around the world today due to their sexuality or gender are unacceptable offenses against humanity. But the Stonewall Uprising led to a series of triumphs over the decades of the liberation of a highly marginalized group of people that allowed them to be out and proud, which is exactly what the Gay Liberation Front and Gay Activism Alliance were made for. Although a lot of work still needs to be done worldwide to increase the freedom and safety of LGBT people, massive strides have been made in the past 50 years, and that is something to be proud of.